On August 2, 2020, while a global pandemic had indefinitely postponed live sports all across America, including the professional tennis tour, one little-known event received unusually high attention: World Team Tennis. The championship match between two teams called the Chicago Smash and the New York Empire achieved around 1 million television views, a record viewership for an event that even tennis fans would be forgiven for not recognizing. From the country versus country competition of the Davis Cup to the emotional star power of the Laver Cup, international team tournaments have been a mainstay of professional tennis for years. In 1973, an all-time great player, with the help of America's most powerful business moguls of the time, attempted to capitalize on this by kickstarting the most sensational and subversive tennis competition the world had ever seen, made specifically with an American audience in mind. Their idea? World Team Tennis, a co-ed tennis league that pitted franchises from across the country against each other in exuberant crowd environments, turning tennis into something more akin to America's most popular sports like baseball and basketball. Despite featuring the world's best tennis talent, WTT has consistently faced frequent financial collapses and languished in relative obscurity ever since its founding. What began as a seemingly surefire public sports spectacle ended up clashing with the tennis establishment, innovating the weirdest-looking tennis court imaginable, and staging perhaps the most ridiculous match ever played. How did WTT tennis begin? And why has it failed at becoming the industry game-changer it set out to be? The story begins with one of the most iconic matches of all time. The Battle of the Sexes exhibition match on September 30th, 1973 saw Billie Jean King, a 10-time women's Grand Slam champion and a trailblazer for gender equality in the sport, face off against infamous hustler and former tennis star Bobby Riggs. Hosted in front of a record audience of 300,000 at the Houston Astrodome, with music blaring and ample fanfare, the match was a far cry from the traditional images typically associated with the old and elite sport. It was also a highly successful and televised event, with over 50 million viewers in the United States alone. The 29-year-old King triumphed over the 55-year-old Riggs in 3 sets, earning greater recognition and respect for female tennis players at large, while also proving there was a growing market among the American public for sensational tennis events like this. The man who produced the Battle of the Sexes match happened to be the most audacious sports promoter of his day, and with King's blessing, he planned to bring tennis to the masses in a way the world had never before seen. His name was Dennis Murphy. Throughout his career as a sports entrepreneur, Murphy had made a name for himself by creating fringe associations that were direct competitors to established sports leagues. Whether it was the American Basketball Association in 1967 or the World Hockey Association in 1972, by '73, he was ready to bring that same competitive entrepreneurial spirit to the tennis world. Murphy partnered with Larry King, Billie Jean's husband, to pave the way for the most innovative and exciting version of tennis imaginable. In fact, Larry King, a California lawyer and longtime women's rights advocate, had been one of the original minds behind the WTA, helping to establish the organization alongside his wife earlier that year. Billie Jean had just shown that a female tennis player could be just as good as, if not better than, a man on the opposite side of the court. With that in mind, they figured, what stops men and women from competing on the same side? Murphy and King, with the help of other business tycoons and bigwigs of the day, founded a tennis competition premised on privately owned teams featuring the top male and female players, bearing bombastic names like the New York Sets and the Boston Lobsters, competing against each other in exhibition matches across major American cities. Aptly titled World Team Tennis, the concept league billed itself to be truly unlike anything previously seen on television. Here's how it worked. To fit in alongside the already established pro tournament scene, World Team Tennis was a salaried, full-time summer-only league, aimed to be an indirect competitor to the then-established Grand Prix and WCT tours, where akin to other sports, the individual teams and franchises were privately managed and owned. In an attempt to streamline the matches and make the sport more appealing for an unfamiliar American audience, WTT changed the format of regular tennis. All matches were played up to sets of only 5 games each, consisting of men's singles and doubles, women's singles and doubles, and mixed doubles. Players were allowed to consult their coaches and swap out teammates mid-match, a rule that would seem more at home in the world of pro wrestling than in pro tennis. A team's points during every match was cumulative, and the rule of advantage during deuce was also removed to avoid long, drawn-out service games. Mascots were a present feature in the stands, and audiences were encouraged to be as rowdy as possible, not only cheering for their favorite side, but also jeering against the rival team, no doubt hyped up by loud rock music that blared through the arena during matches. To create the biggest initial visual impact, WTT showed it wasn't afraid to cross the established lines of tennis, seen in the literal sense with their use of the bizarre no-lined court. Instead of a regular single-colored court, WTT embraced the eye-catching 4-color design scheme, with the creation's patent claiming better visibility and line calling ability for fans, spectators, and officials alike. Interestingly, the visionaries behind this unconventional court design paved the way for the more modern tennis landscape in more ways than one. Jeffrey Grant and Robert Nix, the creators of the colorful World Team Tennis Court, were also the duo who invented the first electronic line judge system in tennis history, a system consisting of sensors embedded within the tennis court lines that was used during both the men's and women's Torrent finals in 1974, but never became commercially viable. However, it may have served to inspire later versions of the modern line judging technology like Hawkeye, which have since become the norm in major tournaments. With these innovations put into place, it's hard to believe now, but the World Team Tennis concept to many was all but a sure thing, especially to investors, many of whom deliberately chose to purchase a WTT team over a steeper-priced NBA or MLB franchise. At the time, the NBA and MLB were stagnating in attendance and revenue generation, and according to former top 10 professional Tom Gorman, World Team Tennis was a big thing back then. There was a lot of excitement around the league. All the biggest stars wanted to be a part of it, and for good reason. Unlike modern-day tennis juggernauts ATP and WTA, stagnated and fractured leagues and organizations back in the 1970s forced players to do their own due diligence in signing with whichever entity provided the best terms and paychecks. And amazingly, for a time this was WTT. Rod Laver, Bjorn Borg, Jimmy Connors, Martina Navratilova, only the best of the best were brought on initially. A teenage Chris Evert signed with the LA Strings for an eye-popping $1.2 million, with Ilie Nastase reportedly later joining her for $1.5 million and 2 Corvettes. Heck, even Elton John composed his hit 1975 song, Philadelphia Freedom, specifically around his favorite sports team, a WTT franchise. A retrospectively bizarre gesture equivalent to The Weeknd creating his hit new single based around his favorite XFL team. However, at the time, WTT had the star power, the spectacle, the financial backing, and innovative ethos to ensure its success for years to come. Instead, of course, the whole thing was a massive flop. A bold idea that appeared amazing on paper, World Team Tennis's initial incarnation and execution was severely hampered by the executive team's lofty expectations. With massive stadiums leased, payroll through the roof, and expected television contracts primed to make the league America's most popular sporting event, attendance following its grand debut was absolutely dismal, to put it lightly. The Detroit Love's inaugural match, held in the 11,000-seat Cobo Arena, only drew 3,600 people, with the rest of the season's attendance hovering around 2,000, despite finishing first in its division and making playoffs, all while fielding some of the best players in the world. Reported figures at the time put both the Detroit Loves and Boston Lobsters at having both lost around $300,000 in just 3 months, a similar fate to 4 other franchises, all who folded after just the first season. With only 10 of the initial 16 teams surviving into the second season, the rebellious camaraderie and excitement which propped the league up was already beginning to reveal foundational cracks. The essential television contracts had never materialized. Mismanagement by many of the league's first-time owners was causing logistical headaches, and above all, players were having doubts. Indiana Love's player Vitas Gerulaitis called his own franchise a rinky-dink operation, choosing instead to spend his single days off flying to and from New York, as it's tough to get up and play when nobody's in the stands. Fellow teammate and Grand Slam doubles champion Jeff Masters claimed to have never received a dime of his $50,000 salary in his final season with the team. Perhaps worst of all, participation in the league had brought about real-world consequences for players whose main career still centered around the pro circuit. Philippe Chatrier, the French Federation president at the time, banned WTT players from participating at the French Open, later unsuccessfully lobbying for the players to also be banned from all tour events. The French Open snub prevented Jimmy Connors from playing in and potentially winning the 1974 Roland Garros, a feat which would have made him one of only 2 male players to ever achieve a calendar year Grand Slam. Lobsters player-coach Ian Tiriac said, "Due to my participation in World Team Tennis, I have been banned from European tournaments, banned from playing Davis Cup, and banned from my own Romanian Tennis Federation." The unremitted infighting, prohibitive expenses, and even player pregnancies prompted the Pittsburgh Triangle's owner and one of WTT's co-founders, Frank Feuer, to sell his franchise, claiming that he'd rather play golf than have to deal with the hassles of corporate responsibilities and the embarrassment of his team's consistently poor performance. Other owners followed suit, and just 4 years following its star-studded inception, the entire league collapsed, having been reduced to a mere 4 teams. This, of course, is only half the story, because amazingly, World Team Tennis still exists to this day, and many tennis fans who happen to flip past a World Team Tennis playoff match on TV wouldn't be blamed for wondering, this thing is still around? Who watches it? While the league was revived just 5 years following its initial demise, having since gone through a revolving roster of owners and funders, its fundamental concept is now radically different. Today, World Team Tennis is now only a 3-week competitive summer league, acting more as a local exhibition series than a truly competitive ATP WTA competitor. Though the league finally did away with the dated multicolor court design in favor of a more modern blue in 2019, the gimmicky sports arena type atmosphere the league has been trying to drum up has remained intact for the better part of 40 years, with little to show for it. Though former CEO Mark Akin has claimed that the league is in fact profitable, no doubt in part due to its unexpected resurgence in popularity during the 2020 season when it was the only live tennis broadcasted on television for months, WTT unexpectedly took this past season off to search for new funding, with only 5 teams remaining in the league, franchises going for $1 million apiece, and Billie Jean King having now left the league as an owner or participant. In essence, it would appear WTT has struggled due to its fundamental misunderstanding of what has made tennis a beloved international sport. Unlike a team competition like the Lever Cup, an event that's integrated with the ATP and can more easily coexist with the professional tour, WTT has been on the outside of the tennis establishment from its inception, with most tennis fans for decades having ignored the league's silly attempts to quote-unquote modernize the sport. One such example comes from a doubles match during the league's 2014 season, where following a loose forehand error from Taylor Townsend that put her partner out of commission, Townsend was forced to compete in the ensuing doubles match on her own against the rival pair. WTT rules prohibited her from returning serves on the left side, leading to these utterly ridiculous moments from the match. This circus-like atmosphere of WTT perhaps strips away the elite, high-level competition that's made tennis the most popular solo sport in the world. When done well, spectacle tennis events can create some truly emotional and meaningful moments for both players and audience, with the image of Roger Federer shedding tears at this year's Lever Cup remaining in the minds of tennis fans for years to come. But with WTT's future once more in jeopardy, it's reasonable to assume the most lasting image of this fringe team competition will be the short-lived multicolored court. Still, the idea of a tennis spectacle clearly hasn't left the minds of the sport's top organizers. Case in point, who remembers the International Premier Tennis League? You know, the ridiculously deep-pocketed tennis league that for 3 years managed to recruit nearly every top player in the world to play winter tennis in locations such as India and the Philippines. There's a reason this sounds almost too crazy to be true. It was an absolute disaster by virtually every metric, with players left unpaid, substantiated rumors of widespread corporate fraud, and former tennis legends left with their reputations tarnished after the dust cleared. This story is so wild, in fact, that I decided to make an entire bonus video about this to serve as the premiere episode of my long overdue series, Second Serve, streaming right now exclusively on Nebula. Second Serve is a brand new cult tennis series where I'll be free to create bonus videos on more obscure yet extremely interesting tennis topics not fit for the YouTube algorithm. A sort of extra or secondary video series, aptly titled Second Serve, streaming now. As I've mentioned in the past, Second Serve is available on Nebula, a streaming service co-owned by myself and a plethora of other amazing YouTubers you've heard of that allows us to upload all of our regular videos without censorship and without any ads. You'll not only receive access to all of my YouTube content and Second Serve episodes going forward, ad-free of course, but loads of early access videos and full-length series from other creators you've heard of also exclusive to Nebula. By signing up right now using my special link below that gives you 20% off a yearly subscription, you're not only directly supporting myself and all future cult tennis content, but receiving access to my new video companion series, Second Serve, available right now.